Many months in the planning, well before this meeting came up. But the rest of our Renew My Church team are here. Annie Bookmeyer, Tom Gull, Marianne Palega, Lisa Reed, Jim Schwarber, and myself. So our meeting this evening will begin with prayer. Lisa and Tom will then walk us through a slide presentation of the scenarios. We'll take a few minutes to see if there are any questions needed for clarification, and then we will provide an opportunity for folks to offer their 1 minute of feedback if they wish to. With COVID protocols in place, one of our team members will hold the mic for folks rather than passing it around. Also want to point out that as you came in, there were feedback forms and a basket of pencils, and we would really appreciate it if everyone would be able to give us some feedback this evening on your sheet. Those who are at home watching on live stream, there's information on our website and in last Sunday's Dome. At the bottom of my Pastoral Associate corner was the address that you could send information into. I know some people think that things are already decided, and I want to assure you that as team members, we feel certain the Archdiocese is working this as a process. We hope that each one of you will feel called to participate in the process by providing that written feedback. So, if we could all just take a couple of nice, deep breaths. Place ourselves consciously in the presence of the body of Christ, as members of his church, as people called to conversion and mission each day. I invite you to take your gather book, to stand and open it to number 743, and let us sing verses 1 and 3 of Sing a New Church at number 743. These words from Jeremiah. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, says the Lord. Plans for your welfare, not for woe. Plans to give you a future full of hope. When you call me, when you go to pray to me, I will listen to you. When you look for me, you will find me. Yes, when you seek me with all your heart, you will find me with you says the Lord. Let us pray. God, who listens and answers prayers, aid us this night in listening to the potential plans for the future of our greater Oak Park parishes. Fill us once again with your Spirit, strengthening within us individually, as a parish, and as a Catholic community of faith, your gifts of wisdom, understanding, courage, and right judgment. Guide us to see with fresh eyes, looking out for the common good of current members and for those we hope will join us as disciples of your Son. We ask this through Christ our Lord. I will now ask you just if anybody has their cell phones on to turn that off, and Lisa Reed and Tom Gall will now lead us in those scenarios.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I'm Lisa Reed, and I'm pleased to be able to share this with you today. Now, some of you know I'm a pretty fast talker, so I'm going to try really hard to keep it slow. If I'm too fast, though, give me a wave, okay? Yes? Yes? All right, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you. Next slide.
Just keep talking slowly.
I'll try. Thank you. So our time tonight, what we're going to do, we're going to share the overall vision of Renew My Church to put some context into what we're going to be discussing today. We're also going to be reviewing the scenarios that you may have already seen on the website. And then, very important, we need your feedback on these scenarios. The best way, the most complete way to capture that feedback is on that paper form. If you would rather write an email, though, because you don't want to write it on a piece of paper, that's welcome as well. Please send us that feedback via email. Again, we need to hear your feedback on these scenarios, and those are two different ways to make sure we capture that. Why that's so important is the team that Mary Catherine talked about. We're gathering this feedback from Ascension so we can give feedback on these different scenarios. That's why it's so important we hear from you, especially on these forms. Thank you for your patience as I continue to talk about that. Very important is that last bullet point, and I'm going to try and remember to say it many times during this presentation. No decisions have been made. Your feedback will be important as we put together a feedback summary for the Cardinal. I know I'm jumping ahead in the presentation, but that's what happens. The Cardinal will eventually make a decision. Eventually make a decision. No decisions have been made so far. Next slide. A little bit on the ground rules. This is Ascension. You guys know the ground rules. You know we're open to the Spirit. We've already talked about silencing our mobile devices. Please don't take pictures of this, because this is for us. This is our family. That said, it is going to be live streamed, so you could always watch it later. Live stream is so important to us on this committee because not everyone's able to make it. But we want everyone in the Ascension Parish family to hear this and, you guessed it, be able to give feedback. That's why we're live streaming. Also, if there's anybody from the media here, I would ask you to put on your parishioner hat. If you're from the media, we want you to be an Ascension parishioner and to hear this. We would also ask, though, you respect your fellow parishioners. Everything we say here is a safe space for Ascension to ask questions, for Ascension to give feedback. There is no permission to share this outside of this room. If you can't respect that, I would ask you to leave. Okay, everyone has stayed, so let's continue. A little bit of context setting. I'm assuming everyone here has heard of Renew My Church. That's why you're here, to learn about this journey. And there are two key components when you think about Renew My Church, how the Archdiocese is thinking about it. Very importantly, it is a spiritual renewal. We want to make disciples. That is job one, to re-encounter Jesus as disciples and build up our communities. And to do that, we may need some structural renewal to make sure our parishes, and I'm thinking generically, broadly in parish, not only Ascension, to have the resources to feed that mission. That's what this is about. Next slide. As I've mentioned, what is this mission imperative? To make disciples, to build communities, and to inspire witness. That is what we are trying to do. The reason why I'm emphasizing that is, for me, it's easy to get lost and to think about the buildings and all that other bit. But this is what we're in service of. So what about these groupings, Lisa? These Oak Park Parish grouping. The why, again, renewed, vital, sustainable Catholic presence. And what we're being asked to consider, what do we need to change structurally given our resource realities so we can deliver the mission? How can we be even more effective through collaboration? I've only been a part of Ascension for 20 years. So I know we have a long history of collaboration across not only the Oak Park parishes, but across greater Chicagoland. So please don't believe that the Archdiocese doesn't think we collaborate. This is to be even more effective, to collaborate, to drive the mission. And just for clarity, the grouping are those parishes that have an address in Oak Park. Ascension, Edmund, Giles, and St. Catherine, St. Lucie. The reason why I'm careful in saying an address, we know the parishioners of Ascension, some live in Oak Park, some do not. And that's true for the other parishes as well. So that's why I'm being careful about saying our grouping are those parishes that have a physical address here. You know this is slide 2 of saying it, no decisions have been made. So what is the process? For those of you who like the high-level picture of what are we going through from a process, there's a group of us who are helping on discernment and really about trying to understand what is our current reality in this grouping. And this particular group of discernment includes you. That's why all of you are here as well, as we share the realities and get your feedback on how we think we can better deliver the mission. Once all of that happens and the cardinal makes a decision, then there will be a transition on any changes structurally from an operations perspective, and then really about building our new reality to really activate the mission. So I just want to give a sense of where we are in the stages. We're all together in that first stage right now. So what we're trying to do in this phase that we're all in together is connect to that larger vision about making disciples, continue to build relationships across these parish communities, because again, we already have some relationships. We're going to be sharing, and you may have already seen this if you've looked at some of the scenarios, the current realities that we're facing in our parishes with the address in Oak Park, looking at the options, and then really what we talk about tangibly. You're like, okay, Lisa, you're talking. What are we doing? What we're doing is providing the Renew My Church Commission with a feedback report to help inform a recommendation for Cardinal Cupich. That is why your feedback is so important. We don't want it to be a few of us giving feedback. We want to hear your feedback so we together can give the feedback for this report. Next slide. Types of meetings, there's the grouping sessions. So there is a group of between 5 to 7 people for each of those parishes with a physical location in Oak Park. We've been meeting, we've been doing formation. One of our key jobs, though, is to get feedback, as I said, from all of you, and incorporate that into this feedback report. This session today is very important to gather feedback from the broader parish. And as I mentioned, what we've been doing so far is learning about the parishes. So for example, we encouraged everyone to come to a Mass if they hadn't already at each of the 4 parishes. We also did a tour of each of the parishes, as well as a school, if there was a school related to it. And then we've been having meetings to learn about our current reality here in Oak Park. So that's what's been happening over the past few months. We've been discussing what we've been learning, and again, we're going to continue to discuss with your feedback tonight. No decisions have been made in this group. We've been listening and learning. So you might ask, okay, I hear you, Lisa. I get the mission. I understand what the process is. But Lisa, seriously, why do we need structural renewal here in Oak Park? To take you through some of the numbers, it's going to be my good friend, Tom Gall.
It's a very large church. St. Edmund's only seats 450 people, and St. Giles 750. As we start looking at how many people attend Mass each Sunday, looking back to 1999, 20 years ago, almost 1,900 people came to Mass here at Ascension. 2 years ago, that had dropped to just over 1,000 people. As we look at these numbers, the declining attendance is anywhere from 35 to 47% over that 20-year period. We thought it was sort of interesting. St. Edmund's had a little jump, and we realized that was the year that we started having our 5 o'clock Mass, sharing it with St. Edmund's. So we know some of you have been sneaking up the street and going to St. Edmund's. But we can see there's a dramatic oversupply of seats to number of people in the pews. So let's look at the next slide. And this is just showing what's happening sacramentally in the parishes. And we always like to think that it's better to have more baptisms than funerals. So this is in 2019, 64 baptisms, only 39 funerals. So that's good to see that. Then the next page, this was a real eye-opener for all of us on the team to look at where the strengths are financially in each parish in Oak Park. So the fiscal years for the Archdiocese always run from July through the following June, sort of because it's following the school calendar of how tuition is collected. So for fiscal year 2020, so that began in July of 2019 through June of 2020. So that includes 1 quarter of the new COVID reality in our church. So you can see with that, though, we still had a surplus, which, as the parish's former business manager, I want to thank you, because this number in COVID is greater than pre-COVID. So you all stepped up to the plate and did what needed to be done to help the parish out. And with the staff making budget cuts, we went from a deficit to a surplus. So that's good news for us as a parish to see that. We can see the other parishes not as fortunate as Ascension has been. And some of that debt, or this deficit, mostly applies in the other parishes to money they owe the Archdiocese. Let's look at the next slide. And this is just a mixed financial picture of where each parish is. So you can see we all have some amount of savings. However, 2 parishes have a lot of debt. Now, one of the things to point out, however the unification of parishes happen, none of the parishes who might be receiving another parish are responsible for that debt. Because, as I said, most of it is to the Archdiocese. It might be their health insurance that they didn't pay, or able to pay, I should say, or maybe their property insurance. So the Archdiocese doesn't want to saddle the new parish with that debt. Some people were a little surprised by this number, the amount of savings at St. Giles. And I would just say, as a former business manager, that happens because in many years, maybe they had a small surplus that just accumulated over time. Or I know in St. Giles' case, they did have an organ campaign and that project has been put on hold. So that might contain a lot of money that has been set aside for a different project. And in St. Giles' case, I'm also thinking that could have also been some gifts they might have received from wills and estate planning. Back to Lisa.
Very good. Thank you so much, Tom. And so one of the things, just to say it again, because I know this came up in our small group conversation, was what about the debt? So as you heard Tom say, in any unification scenario, the debt does not travel. The debt is forgiven. Okay? And we got that from the Cardinal's right-hand person on this. We drilled this poor man, asked him 7 different ways, and every time it was the same answer. So I just wanted to make sure we're very confident on that answer. Okay. So with that, just to recap before we go into the scenarios, we need to reassess and renew, how do we invest in ministry to make disciples? That's what this is about. How do we invest in people? How do we invest in ways to lead as one local church? That's what we're trying to do. So a question I know I had and others had is like, okay, so how is this decision making going to be made on the structural bit? So again, Cardinal Supich makes the final decision. You have these different advisors to the Cardinal on making that decision. And you can see where we are, right? On the local grouping, pastor, parishioners, all of us, and the grouping team providing feedback on the scenarios. But it's the Cardinal's decision. We put together a feedback report based on your feedback on the scenarios. And again, no decisions have been made. So how were the scenarios developed? There were scenarios that were proposed, and you're going to see those today. You're going to see everything we saw on the proposed scenarios. There was also an opportunity to add scenarios. You're going to see that as well. Similarly, after you see this, you may have an idea on an alternative scenario. Very important. Write it on your form or send an email. I can't guarantee it'll be used. I can guarantee it will be discussed and debated. So please, if you have ideas, we need to hear them. We need to hear them. As you can see, these scenarios were provided as discussion starters based upon those realities we already saw on spiritual renewal, as well as what we're seeing when it comes to mass attendance and the financial situation. That was the foundation upon which these were proposed to us. So that language, I apologize, I've been saying scenario and haven't defined it. Scenario is these possibilities regarding new parish structures to enable the spiritual renewal. And so what you can see in these scenarios coming up, it's either you stay in your current parish structure, or we may unite with another parish and all the buildings remain open. Or there may be a scenario uniting with another parish, and some buildings might close. On average, those are usually the variables that you may have already seen and that I'll be reviewing here. To me, this was the money slide. This is what I wanted to see on these scenarios, in that what is the criteria the Archdiocese is using to say if it's a sustainable or a good scenario. To me, this is very, very important when you look at these scenarios. 1, minimum of 800 parishioners, on average, in attendance at weekly Mass. I don't expect that you memorized what Tom showed, but you'll see not every parish in our grouping meets that criteria. Operating revenue, excluding lease income. There's a whole conversation about that because some parishes have a significant lease income. So straight revenue of $750,000 plus to support ministry and operations. You saw not everybody fits that. But school, very important. School is off the table. School is not being considered in this scenario. Ascension School and St. Giles School are not part of this conversation. So that's just for your information, because that's not true in other groupings. And some of you might know, on the St. Catherine, St. Lucie campus, there's a big shoulder school. That's outside of this conversation. Capital repairs must be affordable. So the Archdiocese looked at the different campuses and provided a report on capital repairs and what that looks like. And then you see some qualitative metrics around logistics. For union of parishes, is it possible for staff to share sites? Is it possible for a pastor? Can we do real talk here? Real talk? For 4 square miles. I think we can figure this out. Okay, thank you. Also, we need to think about our local community and what makes sense as well on some of the unions. So all of these are what's being considered if you think of an alternative scenario, this is what you need to think about if you have a creative solution beyond what you've already seen. More vocabulary. Thank you for your patience. Parish. Parish, we are the parish. We are the people, it's the community. In this conversation, the church is the building. It's the sacred space where we worship. You'll see what I mean as we go through scenarios. Okay, I'm not going to go through this. You can just, it has to do with where your records are. Keep going. Canonical Mission. Now, this is your lucky strike extra. It's a little surprise. Not every groupings have a canonical mission option. We do in this grouping. So let's just talk about it. A canonical mission, community of the faithful in a particular church, it is not designated a parish because of its size, or it needs to serve a particular ministerial function. It is sponsored by an adjacent parish, or possibly the Arch, and it could provide a range of pastoral services. An example of this would be if there's a building, right, that is in a location where we need to have a presence, but may not have the numbers to support the ministry. You may have a canonical mission there, would be an example. And you'll, as I said, you'll see that in the scenarios. Maybe this rings a bell as well. So these are our boundaries of the Catholic parishes that have an Oak Park address. We could debate why those are the boundaries. We could say, well, wait a minute, why don't we go this way, or why doesn't Giles go that? It is what it is. Just gonna let you guys know that. These are the boundaries that we're dealing with. There is a rule for any union. You need to be contiguous with the other parish boundary. So let's say all things were equal. What that means is you will not see a scenario where Ascension and Giles, just the two, come together as one union, because we don't touch each other. But then you can see where some of the other combinations do allow a union. I'm not going to argue why that's the case. I'm just telling you that is a reality that we have to deal with. Okay, everybody, are we ready? Are we ready? All right. I know you guys have already seen this, but just to give a little bit of a voiceover, we're going to run through scenarios. You know how it's going to go, right? You're going to start with 3 parishes. We're going to end up with 2. We'll end up with 1. Then there's some alternatives. That's kind of how this is going to roll. So 3 parishes. 3 parishes. That's scenario 1. Ascension and St. Giles remain in their current structure. So Ascension with their current structure, St. Giles in their current structure, and then 2 come together as one of St. Edmund's and St. Catherine, St. Lucy. That's the high level of what this is about. The other scenarios, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the scenarios, but this variation occurs on many of them, is in the combination, the union of St. Edmund and St. Catherine, St. Lucy. One scenario is 1 canonical parish with Mass at both sites. Another option, 1 canonical parish, all the Masses are at St. Edmund, and St. Catherine, St. Lucy, church closes. And another scenario is St. Edmund remains the canonical parish, remains the parish, and this is where that language of mission comes in. St. Catherine, St. Lucy becomes a canonical mission of St. Edmund. So again, 3 parish solution, Ascension alone, Giles alone, St. Edmund, St. Catherine, St. Lucy unite, and there are options within that uniting. Okay, scenario 2, 2 parish solution, 2 parish solution. In this example, you see Ascension with St. Catherine, St. Lucy. You see St. Edmund with St. Giles. So that's how you get to your 2 parishes. In the Ascension, St. Catherine, St. Lucy configuration, as I said, it'll sound repetitive here, 1 parish with Mass at both sites. 1 parish, all Masses are at Ascension, St. Catherine, St. Lucy closes. Next option, Ascension remains the canonical parish, St. Catherine, St. Lucy becomes a canonical mission. And then St. Edmund, St. Giles configuration has only one scenario, which is 1 canonical parish with Mass at both sites. So we did 3, did 2. Here's another option on the 2 parish solution. St. Giles remains in its current state. And then Ascension, St. Edmund's, and St. Catherine, St. Lucy unify as one. And you see the scenarios, 1 canonical parish with Mass at all 3, 1 canonical parish, all Masses are at Ascension and St. Edmund's, and St. Catherine, St. Lucy closes. Or 3 is St. Catherine, St. Lucy becomes a canonical mission of the United Ascension and St. Edmund's. And then there's the 1 parish scenario. Again, there are options in the 1 parish scenario. So in the 1 parish, all 4 parishes that have an Oak Park address come together under 1 pastoral leadership team. And then there are some scenarios on that. So the scenario 4A, formally unite as the 1 parish. As with the other 3 scenarios we've seen, St. Catherine, St. Lucy could remain open as a worship site or close. You would have to designate one of the churches for the sacramental records. And then there's things to be worked out, because we've got 2 parish schools in that scenario. So not impossible, just needs to be sorted through on the governance and ways of working. Another option is you still structure as 1 pastoral team, and it's in solidum. I apologize, my Latin's pretty bad in terms of canon law, while keeping the parishes as separate entities. And if that's to be pursued, we'd have to do it on an experimental basis. But the principle is we would come together as 1, and there are a couple different scenarios on how we would do that. So then there were some alternative scenarios that came out of the small team on this. So an alternative scenario that came up, and I'm sorry to go back in time, this goes back to the 2-parish solution. So in that 2-parish solution, you have St. Catherine, St. Lucy, and St. Giles coming together. And you have Ascension and St. Edmund coming together. It's just a switch. You just switch who Ascension and Giles were with, or who Edmunds and St. Catherine and St. Lucy are with, depending upon your perspective. But similar scenario in that Ascension and St. Edmund configuration, it would be one canonical parish, but you would have Mass at both sites. And it's the same scenario as we've been talking about with St. Catherine and St. Lucy. Both sites, no St. Catherine and St. Lucy Church closes or Canonical Mission. So this was a scenario that came up from our team. And that's it for the scenarios. And so hopefully, as what you have seen is there are some scenarios that were proposed, and then you've seen an alternative scenario that seems that should be under consideration as well. And then again, no decisions have yet been made. So next slide. So what I want to make sure before we go to questions, I just want to review. That's okay, Mary Catherine, you can stay there. I know I've said it a couple times, and thank you for your patience as I keep saying it. We need feedback on these scenarios to put together for this feedback report. Review the scenarios. We're coming up to questions. You get to ask questions. Please turn in your feedback on that form tonight, or feel free to email it to that email address. If you want to take a picture of this, I'm okay with that. You can to make sure you get that email account. So I just didn't want to lose this as we go into questions. Time is of the essence. We're beginning meeting again on Monday of next week. Okay, time is of the essence on this. So I really, if you could make a commitment to send us any feedback, I would say end of day Friday would be ideal. We'll accept feedback all the way along. But if you could, because we would love to discuss your feedback at Monday's meeting. Okay, now we can go to the next slide.
Thank you, Lisa and
Get
Tom.
next slide as well.
So at this point, if there are any questions for clarification, so this isn't the time to offer your 1-minute talk. Jim Schwarber will be in the center there, and if you could make your way to the center aisle to Jim and Ben, I see that you have a hand up, so if you can get over to Jim, he can hold the mic for you to get your question answered. Jim, Ben's over here.
Hi, could you clarify a bit on what the advantages and disadvantages of the canonical of reigning a parish versus a mission? Like, would it be more financially affordable for the church to be a mission?
It has to do with the Sunday staffing mostly, and the amount of personnel needed to have a Sunday Mass. So when we saw with the canonical missions, it's for things specifically like weddings, funerals, baptisms.
There's also, to build on that, exactly right, it's about the staffing, and it's also the freedom on that as well. So for example, our current model of parish would be you would have a pastor, you would have a staff to support. If it's a canonical mission, maybe it's a team of fully trained lay leaders who are leading that mission for outreach in a community. So that's an example of what a canonical mission could look like as well.
My question is that I heard that the schools are not part of this, and I heard you say that several times, Lisa. However, I know that each one of us, our parish, supports the school by a certain percentage. So let's say out of the budget, the school's budget, we provide 5%. So what happens in those cases, and where's that additional money going to come from?
Depends on the scenario.
Yep.
So there's never the scenario of Ascension and Giles that have the two schools, so we don't have to worry about that. How does the parish support it? So if it's Ascension and Edmonds together, whatever that support provided to Ascension School comes from whatever those collections are from the single parish, which combines Ascension and St. Edmunds.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
Because I feel it's a little disingenuous disingenuous to say the schools are not part of this.
Yeah.
When in fact, they are financially.
I think you bring up a very important point that we will capture, especially in that scenario where we're one parish, because we have a specific funding mechanism. Whereas Tom said, depending on the other scenarios, that funding mechanism could hold. So thank you. This is exactly what we're talking about, making sure we put those on the table, so to speak, as something that would have to be considered, especially in that one parish scenario. Thank you.
Hi, I know that all 4 parishes are meeting at the same time to date. The question I have is, it would seem to me that both St. Catherine, St. Lucie, and St. Edmunds have a lot more, I don't want to use the word lose, but it would seem to me that are they going to carry more weight in their discussions on scenarios versus the folks from Giles and Ascension? I mean, as far as, the RCM or whatever.
So,
Go ahead.
So Greg was asking if Ascension carries more weight than, say, a St. Catherine, St. Lucie, or does St. Edmunds carry less weight than St. Giles? The interesting thing is it's an equal number of people from each parish who have been attending all of these meetings. So in each one of those cases, everybody has learned a lot more about the other parishes, and we're starting to take notes like, well, no matter what happens, we want to make sure we do this still. So, even the receiving parish, as they used to call it, is taking notes of what are those ministries that are important to the parishioners themselves.
The other build on that is this team is not providing a recommendation that says we should go with scenario J. So what we're doing is providing feedback on those scenarios, specifically what are the strengths or or the weaknesses with it. So in that sense, all voices will be heard. For people who really like a scenario, they will have very robust strengths. For those who are worried and think it could fight the mission of spiritual renewal, those voices will be heard as well. I hope that helps.
All right, so 2 questions for me. I'll be very clear and crisp here, Lisa. The first question is, what time horizon are we trying to solve for with Renew Your Church? Are we trying to solve for the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, etc.? Because as you look at some of the particular scenarios, you could see some are more of an interim solution, where some could be the end solution. So that's question 1. And the second question is, I'm curious, of all the scenarios, many different options, I wonder why one of them had Giles as its own standalone canonical structure, whereas Ascension did not have any options with Ascension's own canonical structure. So specifically scenario number 3. So those are my 2 questions.
So your second question is yet another scenario that we can consider. So put that on your feedback form, and when we have our next meetings together, we can bring that scenario as a question as well. And now, since I said that, I forgot, what was your first question?
The time horizon of Renew My
the time
Church.
horizon.
And I don't think we have an answer to that. The only one that indicates there would be a review is the 4B
That's right.
scenario, where that's the structure which no one else has been offered in the entire Archdiocese. This has only come up to our Renew My Church as a result of our 4 teams meeting together and kind of pulling for something more. And that's where all 4 would maintain their own parish name and structure, but there would be an overall pastoral team to coordinate all the efforts. So instead of necessarily having a ministry of care at each parish, maybe there would be 2 ministries of cares to cover the larger span of the Oak Park area, so to speak. Those kinds of things.
And then Jason, to your question on time horizon, if you look at those scenarios and you were to say, we could do that scenario, but we're going to be back here in 5 years, because we haven't really addressed the root structural problems. We need that feedback, because that would be an example of something to put on the weakness of it. So I didn't answer your 10, 20, 30, but I think that some of the question behind the question might be that. We definitely need to see where you're seeing that, if you can email or fill that out. Thank you.
A question on potential capital expenses. You'd mentioned that the Archdiocese did an evaluation of each property. Has there been a dollar figure attributed to deferred maintenance and potentially a 10-year schedule of repairs or capital expenses that might be needed over the next 10 years? And then a second question that's related, in terms of a mission structure, and I think we could all understand that it would be St. Catherine, St. Lucy, in any scenario that could be the mission. With any kind of deferred maintenance there might be, would there be any seed money from the Archdiocese to take care of those, so there's not a weight around the shoulders of any of the churches or parishes that might take on St. Catherine, St. Lucy as a mission? And would there be any ongoing support to help fund any needs in the future, looking at the operating deficit that St. Catherine, St. Lucy has had over the last several years?
To your first question, the buildings office of the Archdiocese has gone around to survey the parishes, and to keep in mind that at Ascension, the school is considered 3 buildings because there is the original building and then 2 later additions. Then there's the church, then there's the office across the street, and then the parsonage. So we don't really think that we have 6 buildings, but we do. At St. Catherine, St. Lucy, they have a similar large number of buildings. St. Edmunds has only 3. So, and St. Giles has, I think, 15. It just seems so big up there. But they have gone around to each parish, but they have done some work at St. Edmunds, so they're asking them to go back and reevaluate them. They haven't done Ascension and Giles in a while, so I believe this month, or September, October, they are coming back out to survey our sites. But as I look here, I know most of you were here when we've done so much work in all of our parish buildings. So I'm not on the building committee here anymore, but I think we're in pretty good shape most of the time with our scenario with the buildings. In terms of ongoing support, I would probably say no. That this is why they've done the different campaigns through the Archdiocese. We did 4 or 5 of them here, that it's really up to the parishioners to provide the support for their own buildings.
So to your point, if that's a concern about some of the scenarios, about what's the condition of the building, how are we going to fund that maintenance, that would be something to write down on the feedback form to make sure we raise that question. I'm sorry, looking over. Thank you. That we raise that question, because they are updating that information, but we haven't seen the updated information, because some of those parishes took issue with what the maintenance actually needs to be going forward. So please do capture that, because that would be a consideration.
Hi. I noticed in the various scenarios several possible options where the St. Catherine, St. Lucy Church would close, but I found it curious that in none of those scenarios the St. Edmund Church would close. And I'm not picking on St. Edmunds. Me and my 9 siblings graduated from St. Edmunds, and we have a long family history there. But I'm just curious why that was considered. Why not considered? Is it something to be considered? I'm just thinking location, kind of history of the parish, kind of shrinking in size. So.
And again, any scenario can be proposed, but what wasn't received was that scenario. And because of that, the criteria that I'd mentioned on the number of people, right, that might be an issue. They're paying their bills overall, right? Also, there's on that qualitative measure about it being in the center of Oak Park and what might be the opportunity. So those were some of the conversations that I've had about why have St. Edmunds as a physical spot. But again, if you think that's a bad decision, please write that down as well.
First of all, I want to thank the committee for all of the work that you put into this. All the rest of us did not volunteer, so those of you who did volunteer, or whether it was coerced volunteerism or volunteerism, thank you very much for all the work that you've done. Lisa, you talked about two facets of this, spiritual and structural. I think we've gotten a lot of information on the structural side of things. Has there been any qualitative assessment of what are the various missions that each parish is involved in? And if this is an evangelization effort, how can we maximize the evangelization opportunity through our combination? What kind of work has gone into that question?
So a lot of that is the feedback that would be moving forward. My light says green, but I don't hear the mic. At any rate, they have pastoral folks from the Archdiocese that then work with the final structure, the final scenario that's decided to bring us up to speed. In terms of what they're looking at now, we've all kind of shared the different things. As Lisa had mentioned, we went around to the different parishes and they all told their stories. And every parish has some very unique things that they offer. There's no doubt about that. But the idea will be to move out in evangelization, and I don't think any one of the four are really over the top of that right now.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, we were so excited about what the possibilities were. So for example, peace and justice. I know we're already collaborating, but if we go out as one, what does that allow? We also were talking about the social justice mission of reaching out, whether we're talking west side, whether we're talking south of our borders, whether we're talking north of our borders. The spirit was alive when we were having those conversations. We talked about youth ministry and how do we get those OPRF kids and others, young adults, back into the fold. So there's not a concrete plan, but I do want to say when we had those visits, we really got a sense of we are able to be better together. What structure needs to support, that's a whole other conversation, but we could see the spirit working. So that's what we think is our opportunity on how do we do it, but we don't have a plan for that. But there are conversations.
And I think we discovered that in many ways that a lot of us didn't know was the parishes are already collaborating over the years. There was discussion about our lifelong learning has worked with St. Giles on theirs. St. Giles specifically called out Doug Wyman for bringing UPAJ to them. We know that they've also participated in ASP program because Ascension started that here. They loved our community garden. That was one thing they were really impressed with that, so you should all go to the back of the parish office and see our community garden sometime. And there, I think then with Religious Ed, we're starting some of that collaboration already too.
Next portion. Do you have a question, Doug?
Well, yes, and more. First,
Okay.
I do want to thank all of you. Renew our church, rather renew Christ Church. I would like to take you for 20, 30 years from now, when we have no priests, when we have, we're really in trouble with that, or one priest, and we expect him to do everything. So I wondered how the small Protestant congregations did this. And I found that they were more interested in Christ's message to love the poor, take care of the widows and the orphans. And then I looked at this crucifix that we have here at Ascension, where we have Mary, the Mother of God. We have Mary Magdalene, and we have another person there that I'd like to know who that is. Wonderful. Now, and at present, our church, we have women who are, our Protestant churches have women that are deacons and priests. Ascension has more women that have master's degrees in theology and write great homilies on our dome that we need to allow our women to be deacons and priests, and they will help us to renew Christ's church.
You're right, Doug. I'm not sure that was a question. So let's move then to the, one more question. Any more questions?
I was just curious if the Archdiocese gave any guidance on how much the priest situation would inform the decision. In one scenario, it's all four combined, which would probably be one pastor. In another scenario, it's three pastors. Other scenarios, it's two. Do they at all indicate what sort of weight that would come into the decision process?
So I don't believe that, I think that one of the things the Cardinal in our small group, when he met with us on a Friday evening over the internet, the question had been raised about pastoral coordinators, and he agreed that he was thinking about that. Now that's something that we had in the Archdiocese under Cardinal Bernardine. So there's in some of those scenarios, it's likely that we would not have a priest at each site, but we would have certainly minimally one pastor, and it could be more, but the likelihood is that there are going to be more staggered masses and so on at the different worship sites, no matter what. So we will not have the priests, and the priest shortage is real, and they had given us information about that, and I'm not sure why they didn't give us a slide on that either, so.
That was my fault. I deleted the priest slide because it just showed, you guys could do the slide for me, right? Numbers are going down? Okay, got it. So that's the only reason why, because I'm like, you guys all knew that, and I wanted to give space for Tom to really go through the numbers, because I thought that might be more. So that's my fault. So we don't have the details on how those would be set out, but that's a really important consideration of what do we think is the minimum number we need in those combinations, right, to really bring the ministry alive. Thank you.
Okay, so it is 8 o'clock, and we'd like to try to wind this down by 8:15. So we'd like to take some 1-minute comments now. If people have a comment they would like to make that they think would be helpful for the rest of the assembly to hear, and folks on live stream, that might help them in their own formation of feedback.
Yeah.
We have timers for your 1 minute, so we'll give you a wave when it's 30 seconds.
Hi, my name's Terry Hull. I'm Vice President of Ascension's Home and School Association, the PTO. I just want to make it known that I think it's very important that the sites that do have schools have very strong leadership behind them, whether that's a dedicated pastor to both Ascension and Giles and whoever is absorbed or however things are divvied up. But I think it's pretty critical, given the enrollment in both schools, to keep them viable, to have some good leadership.
And thank you for your service in home and school, and write that down on a piece of paper.
So first off, I want to thank you for all the time and effort you guys all put in, because I can see what you guys have done. I guess my only point this is we're asked to put together or to give you the scenarios and what we're recommending. But from what I'm hearing, there's too much unanswered questions for us to actually say, hey, we think 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. And I think we've learned that from here. There's still more that we need answered before I think the Cardinal can even make a decision. So I think until we get some of those additional answers that we've discussed, I think that's probably the most prudent thing. That's my thought.
I know I'm pitching these forms really hard, but if there are specific questions, please write those down, because we could even write in the feedback form, there are strengths and weaknesses, but these are critical questions that need to be answered for this to be a viable scenario. So that would be really helpful.
I recognize that you were handed the groupings, but I find it odd that geographic location in Oak Park is what made the difference, when I don't think the parishes necessarily have that much in common, and there are big patches of Oak Park that aren't even included in the parish boundaries. So I'd really like to see scenarios that go beyond the simple geographic boundaries of Oak Park, because I don't think what we're seeing makes sense in terms of current reality.
Thank you. Any other comments that people would like to make? Yes.
One of the things I just wanted to emphasize, the idea that we are stronger together, it sounds great, and sometimes people think, oh, well, that just sounds good. It doesn't work that way. What I wanted to talk about was I've recently joined the staff working with liturgy and sacramental programs. Sorry, Doug. What's that? Take my mask off? Okay. I recently joined the staff working for liturgy and sacramental programs. And I have had the most amazing work experience of my life because of the collaboration that we've had with St. Giles during this time. I feel more supported than I've ever felt in a job, and I feel that I have both people who manage my time and that sort of thing, but also people who are really mentors to me, and many people that I can go to and say, hey, how do I do that? And it is so great. And I know that the Peace and Justice has also experienced that strength, but I wanted to make sure people knew that it isn't just a saying that we're stronger together. It's the truth.
Thank you, Jane Ann.
I may have missed this at the beginning, but what's the timeline here? Because you want our feedback, and I'm taking it that you would like this within 2 days, 3 days, and then what happens?
Yep. Actually, if you don't mind jumping a couple of slides. So I have a slide to talk a little bit. So what comes next? So I didn't make it up, right? Right there. What comes next? We're going to collect your feedback, share it with the team members from the other parishes. Our meeting is Monday night. Okay, so that's why I'm asking any feedback over this next week would be super helpful. Keep going. And then we'll continue our discernment on those scenarios, and we have to submit our feedback. I think it's December 7th. It's that first week in December. So that's when we have to give the feedback, again, strengths, opportunities, questions on those scenarios. And then my understanding, and Mary Catherine or Tom will correct me, my understanding is we'll have the decision from the Cardinal in that late January, early February timeframe. Is that your? Yep. So that's how it goes. Say that again?
Once it's decided in January, February, then when will it go into motion?
Yeah, so then once the decision is made, if there are implications, I don't expect you to remember, but way earlier in the presentation I talked about there's a transition time frame. And then we start the new mission together, whatever that looks like. So that middle time, there'll be people from the Arch, again, if we're impacted on this, to guide us through that next scenario. But it won't be tomorrow. The timeline I saw on my slides was like a 6 to 9 month window. So we're in the discernment, transition, start anew.
If you have friends either at St. Bernardine's or St. Luke's, they've been in this process, and I think it's starting to gel. It's been almost 9 months or 10 months now. I think that they've been one single parish, and it seems to. I think it's gone much better than they anticipated, is my guess. So, I think we take heart.
Thank you for answering the first questions I had. Something we need to keep in mind is that, oh, by the way, I'm Brian Godvillis. I'm the head of the Knights of Columbus at Ascension. I think one thing we need to keep in mind as we work through this, it's a very difficult time to be going through this process. We need to remember what it was like in 2019 and before. So while we have not had access to all the different programs and ministries that Ascension's so well known for, now is the time to get involved again. Each of you has something to bring to the table for this parish and any of the parish we may join with. So it's great to see more people at Mass on Sundays, and it'll be even also nice to see people getting out to the various programs and ministries Ascension offers. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. One back here, Jim.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. It was so much better than reading it in the bulletin. But my concern is some of us are not going to be around in 5 and 10 years. Where are all the people who this is really going to affect? How are we going to get them to tell us what they would like to see and do? I mean, is there anything thought about in relation to the parents of the school and religious ed students? I mean, the fact that they're not here tonight, what does that say? So I would like to have their input also. So how do we go about doing that?
Amen, amen, Rosemary.
I hope that maybe one way is, I know the Wednesday newsletter goes out. I think that the feedback page is on the website, that people could download it and send it in, or the information about the email is also there on the website. And I'm sure that Mary Ann and Tim Smith would be very happy to promote that with their parents and ask them to go there and fill it out, or even attach the copy of the feedback.
Absolutely, and we are live streaming it. I don't know our numbers, we'll find out later. I'm hoping that's also a way to reach out folks who aren't in the building. And if I may tell a little story, Mary Catherine's like, uh-oh, what story is Lisa gonna tell? I think Tom might guess it. There was a conversation with Cardinal Supich that he shared with us at that Teams meeting, that some older parishioners talked to Cardinal Supich about how do we get the young people involved. And see, I get verklempt. Every time I tell the story, I get all teary about it. He's like, tell your kids, tell your grandkids, why are you Catholic? Why are you still here? And again, look, I get verklempt again, because I'm like, wow, that's powerful. That doesn't solve everything. I'm not saying that, but I appreciated that, because we are here. We care so deeply. And hopefully, by us telling our story, why we're fighting for it, we can inspire the next generation, my kids' generation, and beyond to do it. So I know it's an easy answer, but I just wanted to offer that story from Cardinal Supich.
I was just curious, is there a recording of this meeting? Since it was live streamed, is it also recorded, and can we pass it on to people who couldn't be here?
It should be on our YouTube channel shortly after we end. And there's one over here, Jim, yeah.
Thank you, Jim. So in answer to Rosemary's question, I think one of the reasons why people younger than us aren't here is because they're putting kids to bed. And they're after a long day of hybrid school, they're helping them with homework. So I know the time is short because you have a meeting on Monday, but I also know decisions aren't going to be made until December. And so can the committee kind of like reach out, like go to the next meeting of the Knights and make sure that all of the Knights get this message, and some of our really vibrant ministries? Can you take this, a compacted version of what you've done for us tonight, and reach out to our most vibrant ministries?
So I love that idea. We've talked to Parish Council, of course, on a little bit of this conversation. I don't want to commit others on the team. I would be very happy to talk to anybody about this at any time. So Lisa Reed, you can do Ascension RMC. I'm sure others would join me in that mission. But the more who hear this and can give us the feedback, the better decisions will be made for all of us. So Dan, or anybody, the invitation's out there. Email, and we're happy to figure it out. Or at least I will.
But I think it's worth noting that we are going back to the group meetings. So there is not a lot of time for another 3 months worth of meetings, because this next section is, once we start having these group meetings back together, is the writing team has to take a significant time to structure this all together, to make the scenarios look real to what could happen here in Oak Park. So I'm just saying, I don't think me going to the Knights of Columbus in 3 weeks is going to be in the right amount of time when we're meeting next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, because it's all starting to consolidate now. So hopefully They're all watching on YouTube right now and can get their feedback in.
We have at least 55 watching on live stream, so that's, again, a good number for now. And I know other people who are doing exactly what Dan was saying, putting their kids to bed, and they asked me earlier, will it be on YouTube? I said, you betcha, you can watch it later. Are there any more statements before we move into final prayer? Well, I would just really like to thank you all for making the time to come out, for making the time to speak up on behalf of all your fellow parishioners, and providing us with additional questions that we can bring back, because as we all know, we all have one part of the puzzle. None of us knows the whole puzzle, so all of us together can come up with a lot of wonderful, good things. And again, if you didn't have a chance or don't get on the website, in this week's Dome, and I had left some out on the table back there, all the scenarios are listed in here, and at the bottom of my column is the address for the feedback. So everything you need is in here if you have not had a chance to pick one up.
Do you mind if we finish with the Renew My Church prayer?
We can do that too. I wanted to just do a little opening piece first. Okay. So let's just take a moment to give thanks to God for this day and reflect on the moments of goodness that we experienced today. And let us also take a moment to remember a possible missed opportunity to be Christ for another person or any other situation that comes to mind that needs healing and forgiveness. And let us stand and pray the Renew My Church prayer.
Lord Jesus, all together, you speak to us today as you spoke to Holy.
Protect us, Lord, as we stay awake. Watch over us as we sleep. That awake we may keep watch with Christ, and asleep rest in his peace. And may the all-powerful Lord grant us a restful night and a peaceful death, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Thank you and good night.
Please remember to turn in your feedback form tonight or email it to us. Thank you.